For years, the most terrifying goal-scoring machine on the entire planet had one gigantic, embarrassing hole in his CV. He had never played at a World Cup. Not because he wasn't good enough. This is a man who scores goals the way the rest of us breathe, but because his country simply could not get him there. And so, every 4 years, while football threw the biggest party on earth, the most lethal striker of his generation sat at home, on the sofa, and watched it like the rest of us. Well, not anymore. Because at 25 years old, Erling Haaland has finally arrived at a World Cup, and he is doing precisely what he was built, engineered, and possibly grown in a laboratory to do. Score, and score, and score again. This is the story of the machine who waited his whole life for this stage, and is now making up for every single second he missed. Let's start with the machine itself, because you cannot understand this story without understanding just how absurd Erling Haaland is. This is not a normal footballer. This is a 6'4" Norwegian bulldozer who reached 100 goals in the top leagues of Europe faster than any human being in history. This is a man who once scored 36 goals in a single Premier League season. He does not dribble past you with silky feet. He simply arrives, like a natural disaster, and the ball ends up in the net. Defenders don't mark him so much as file a missing person report afterwards. And the most unsettling part? He doesn't even celebrate like a human being. After ripping a team apart, Haaland sits down, crosses his legs, closes his eyes, and meditates. On the pitch. Like a monk who has just committed a crime. The numbers he produces genuinely look like typos. Season after season, he doesn't just lead the scoring charts, he laps them, putting up totals that used to belong to an entire strike force. Fans stopped calling him a striker years ago and started calling him a cheat code, a robot, a Terminator sent from the future with a single line of programming. Find ball, score goal, repeat. Opposition managers spend a whole week building a plan to stop him, and then he scores in the first 10 minutes anyway. And you can almost watch them close the laptop and quietly give up. And that is the perfect introduction to the gloriously strange world of how this creature is built. Because Erling Haaland is less a man and more a personal science experiment, largely run by his own father. He reportedly eats around 6,000 calories a day, roughly 3 times what a normal adult needs, and his favorite foods are not exactly a footballer's Instagram salad. He eats heart, he eats liver. He carries around a homemade concoction he genuinely calls his magic potion, which is milk blended with spinach and kale. He wears blue light blocking glasses to protect his sleep, meditates on the sides of Norwegian mountains, and listens to the same song before every single game. He trains like a Formula One engine and eats like a Viking preparing for a raid. Nothing about this man is left to chance. He has, quite deliberately, turned himself into a machine whose only function is to put a football into a net. But here is where the story turns from funny to genuinely tragic. Because for all that power, football played the cruelest joke imaginable on Erling Haaland. It gave the greatest goal-scoring talent of his generation to a country that could not reach a World Cup. Norway had not qualified for the tournament since 1998. 1998. A full 2 years before Haaland was even born. Think about what that means. This man arrived on Earth, grew into the most feared striker alive, broke record after record after record on the biggest club stages in the world. And through his entire life, the one arena that truly defines footballing greatness, the World Cup, simply carried on without him. Every 4 years, the greatest show on the planet came around. And the man built to dominate it was a spectator. All that power, all that talent, and no stage worthy of it. The prime years of a generational striker ticking away, with the biggest prize in the sport permanently out of reach. For any other player, you might shrug and call it bad luck. But this was the best goal scorer of an entire era, locked out of the one tournament that turns great players into immortals. It is the footballing equivalent of building the perfect racing car and never once being allowed onto the track. And to understand how he got here, you have to meet the man behind the machine, his father, Erling Haaland. Dad was a professional himself, a Premier League player who won 34 caps for Norway. And from the very beginning, he engineered his son. The diet, the training, the recovery, the mentality, all of it curated, obsessively, from childhood, by a father who was quietly building a striker. And there is a delicious little twist buried in that family history. Alf Inge's own playing days were ended under one of the most infamous tackles in Premier League history, a challenge so brutal it became a legend all of its own. So the internet, being the internet, has long joked that Erling was not so much raised as forged, a son engineered in part to go out and conquer the game that once chewed his father up. Whether that is true or just a great story, it fits him perfectly. The boy built in a lab, powered by liver, kale, and a family grudge. Even now, the ritual holds. The night before a match, Erling Haaland's meal of choice is lasagna, cooked by his dad. The most fearsome forward on earth, still eating his father's home cooking the night before he goes out to terrorize a nation's defense. It is equal parts adorable and terrifying. So when Norway finally qualified for the 2026 World Cup, this was not just another tournament. This was the dam breaking. This was a quarter of a century of pent-up frustration, of watching from the outside, all released at once. And Haaland arrived like a man with 25 years of unfinished business. And the goals came immediately. 2 against Iraq, then a brace against Senegal in a wild 3-2 win, brushing aside one of Africa's best. He had, at that point, scored in something like 13 consecutive internationals for his country. The man was not easing into his first World Cup. He was demolishing it from the first whistle, as if terrified someone might take it away from him again. For a stretch there, he was scoring so freely he was averaging close to a goal every single half he played, sitting right at the very top of the tournament charts alongside names like Mbappe, Dembele, and Vinicius. Superstars from the grandest clubs on earth, matched blow for blow by a Norwegian who, a year earlier, had never so much as kicked a ball at a World Cup in his life. In fact, Norway became so confident, so comfortable, that they did something almost disrespectful to the rest of the field. Having already done the hard work, they rested him. They made a heap of changes, lost 4-1 to France with Haaland sitting on the bench as an unused substitute, and still marched through to the knockout rounds anyway. That is how good this Norway side has quietly become. They can leave the best striker on the planet in his tracksuit, take a beating from the favorites, and it barely matters. And then, when it did matter, in the round of 32 against the Ivory Coast, with the game deadlocked and the tension rising, guess who popped up in the 86th minute to settle it? Of course it was Haaland. His 5th goal of the tournament, one behind Lionel Messi in the race for the Golden Boot, and the strike that dragged Norway into the round of 16. Their first appearance in a World Cup knockout round since 1998. The year, once again, before he was born. Now, in classic Scandinavian fashion, Haaland himself is playing it all down. Ask him if Norway can win the World Cup and he'll flatly tell you, absolutely not. That they are not contenders, nothing to see here. But the rest of the football world is not so sure, and it is absolutely terrified of them. Because the pundits and the supercomputers have quietly landed on Norway as the great dark horse of this tournament, the team nobody wants to draw, the one that could blow the whole thing open. And the reason is standing right up front, in the number 9 shirt, meditating after goals. When you have the most clinical finisher alive, on a mission 25 years in the making, you are dangerous to absolutely anybody. And honestly, the best part is how much he is enjoying it. Freed from the weight of never having been there, Haaland has spent this whole tournament looking like a kid handed the keys to the theme park, scoring for fun, meditating on the grass, hanging out with rappers, soaking up every second of the stage the sport kept from him for 25 years. He waited so long that he now seems determined to actually enjoy every minute of it, which, for the defenders lining up against him, might just be the most frightening thing of all. So can he actually do it? Can the machine win the World Cup at the first time of asking? Realistically, probably not. Norway are not France. They are not Argentina. They don't have that endless depth of talent all over the pitch. The romantic in you wants to believe, but the smart money still says a bigger nation lifts the trophy. And yet, every knockout game now comes with the same warning label attached. Keep the ball away from Haaland, because if it drops to him even once, even for half a second, it tends to end up in the back of the net, and your World Cup tends to end right there. Because here is the truth at the heart of all of it. For 25 years, the World Cup happened without Erling Haaland, and all he could do was dream about it. Now he is finally here, on the stage he was quite literally built for, and he is playing like a man determined to punish the sport for every single summer it made him miss. The machine waited an entire lifetime for this, and it does not intend to waste 1 second of it.